everyone, and welcome to another episode of Page Turners Plus. As always, we thank you for joining us. Today, we'll be reflecting on Casualties of Truth by Lauren Francis-Sharma. To tell you a bit more about Lauren and this novel, we have Paula.
Thank you, Rolji. Lauren Francis-Sharma is a writer of Trinidadian heritage. We've previously discussed her second novel, Book of the Little Axe. Her third novel, Casualties of Truth, is what we're discussing today. It's not set in the Caribbean. And aside from the fact that the protagonist's parents are from Trinidad and Tobago, there is very little connection to the Caribbean. Instead, the novel is built around a traumatic event that impacts the life of the protagonist, Prudence. The event occurs in 1996 in Johannesburg, South Africa. This novel is a provocative, exquisitely well thought out psychological thriller that will leave you unsettled. Although its big picture invitation to readers is to contemplate the implications of South Africa's Truth and Reconciliation Initiative, it also offers a more intimate invitation, one that requires us to critically analyze our notions of what constitutes right and wrong.
Thank you very much, Paula. So I think we could begin with perhaps a comparison with other novels that we've done at Page Turners Plus. We've read at least two morality novels this year: Tobias Buckel's A Stranger in the Citadel and Nalo Hopkinson's Black Hat Man. Without creating spoilers, is this also a morality novel?
I think it is. I think this is the ultimate morality novel. I think the questions that the novel invites, I think the novel invites us to examine critically what constitutes right and wrong, what we think is right and wrong, and it probably asks us to re-examine our assumptions about right and wrong. Um, Both Prudence and I'm so scared to say his name because I'm sure I'm going to pronounce it incorrectly. Machadiso make questionable moral choices, highly questionable moral choices. We can see the novel takes pains to show us how they justify it. And I think the novel may even invite us to consider that the way they justify it may have some grounding in what is sensible and what is just. Um, I think, quite frankly, I think the novel that is the central concern of this novel is what is just, what is moral. Even in her private life, Prudence's choices in her private life, the way she parents, the way she relates to her husband, I think the novel is inviting us to consider questions of morality, questions of what is right, what is wrong, what is acceptable conduct. That's how I saw it. I saw this as purely a morality novel.
And it also made me question my own morality because I've read about apartheid and the Truth and Reconciliation Committee before, but in the way that Lauren Francis Sharma covered the Truth and Reconciliation Committee in this one, it made me question how could some of these actions be forgiven? Things that were mentioned throughout the novel, and it made me question my own morality and how I view things and how I view right and wrong. And I think she did a really good job of bringing those questions to the fore in this particular novel.
I want to ask you and Paul a question about right and wrong and explaining or justifying what your actions may be, which may not come down on the side of somebody else's judgment of what is right. And is it about compromising? Is it, I use the word compromise, is it horses for courses, to use a highly colonized phrase, but is it that we take actions and try to approximate right as closely as possible, but to be pragmatic in the choice that we take or must take? I don't know if I've explained myself.
I think I see what you might be going for, Tony, because as I was listening to the discussion, I was thinking, is it about right and wrong as much as it may be about what might be necessary to be done given circumstances? So I kind of see what you mean in terms of you make a choice. Maybe you don't necessarily think it's it's, right, but maybe it's the necessary thing that you actually have to do.
Because Roger, and I that you spotted me right, Francine. But Roger, the truth and reconciliation um, exercise, I mean, called for forgiving some horrific wrongs. I mean, that's. I think there's been a lot of criticism of it on that basis. Um, how can you move on just by admitting to your heinous crimes or your acts, and then we have it all out there, and we look at the bigger picture that says, all right, we have to heal, we have to move on. We can't go for blood, we can't go for guts, we can't, we can't have this revenge sort of thing. So that is enough to grapple with. That whole truth and reconciliation exercise is in the context of apartheid in South Africa, and we may have a similar one in years from now with Gaza. But you know, these are difficult. These are difficult exercises.
But
And
the
I su-
novel was about difficult choices. I think that that's what the novel is about.
Yeah,
absolutely. And
yeah, I agree.
I was gonna say, Tony, it reminded me of one of the quotes that was in the novel from Ida B. Wells, where she says, "The way to right wrongs is to turn the light of truth upon them." I'm not sure that I necessarily agree with that. And what do you guys think? Because yes, the light was shone upon the truth, but that doesn't necessarily mean that the wrongs were made right, which I
Yeah,
think is what we saw coming out of the Truth and Reconciliation meetings.
I agree with you, Francine, because I saw that quote and I understand it in its principle and its the basic idea of shedding light can begin the healing journey, but there is no expectation of any sort of accountability outside of speaking and recalling all the horrors that were committed. There is the expectation that the people who are the victims must forgive, and in order for them to move on, they have to make peace with these atrocities and just move on. So it's a kind of asymmetrical setup where one side is expected to make peace and move on, where and another side is just expected to say, to just recall what was done. And while I was reading, I kept thinking about how there are many truths that are at play in this text. There is the truth that the Black South Africans experience. There is the truth that the people like Voltaire and the state machinery operated on, that they felt that these activists were a threat to the country, and they saw nothing wrong with targeting little children for extermination, even for simply handing out flyers. That was something considered an act against the state of South Africa. So how then do we balance this idea of reconciliation if there are all of these multiple truths, and if only one side gets to fully live with the consequences of those truths? And I am thinking as well of the incident where it was the first in the courtroom that Prudence was recalling, where it was revealed for the first time that the Mozambique eight were not adult men. They were children. They were children. They were teenagers, and there was this sort of cavalier way in which Voltaire talked about poisoning them and harming them and setting them up to look as though they were committing terrorist acts. He was just so casual about it. And Prudence knows that there's this white dude that got up and left. So she's like, did they not know that this was happening? Did the white population of South Africa not realize that all of these terrible things were happening? So if there are all of these different truths at play, how can we get reconciliation? You know, how how is that? How do we get to healing if it's possible to get to healing? And I'm not quite sure that even Prudence at the end has gotten to that healing space, if that was, what she was aiming for at all.
Deborah, you actually wanted to pick you up on a philosophical point because you mentioned the many different truths, but what about the possibility of many different moralities? Because we get insight into the minds of Voltaire and even Zwane.
Zwane.
And from Voltaire's testimony, he seemed like he thought this was not only legally right, but it was the moral thing to do. And of course he's thinking from the perspective that South Africa back then was a white state. Even though they were in the minority, they genuinely thought this was a white state and that these black South Africans were trying to destabilize it. And they were thinking the moral thing to do is to oppress these people. And we're seeing it play out in 2025, where people are claiming morality for their actions in the Middle East.
Absolutely, absolutely. So
Yes, and it's
go ahead, Devin.
no, I mean, I can't help but draw the parallels too. I'm not sure if that was, I can't speak to intent, but it just is timely. I even in my notes was making like these points that this is how people will talk about the what is happening in Gaza years from now. This is how people will reflect. This is how people will um um try to justify their actions or non-action, because a lot of that is happening as well. And I kept thinking that there's so much of the burden of healing and bearing these truths are so much of it is on the people who are adversely affected by it. So there has to be in order for us to progress, in order for any sort of I don't want to use healing again, but I feel that's the only word, reconciliation, healing, in order for that to happen, truth, the acknowledgement of the harm caused has to be more than just noted for the books. There has to be other types of there has to be recompense, reparations or what have you, but there has to be some kind of reckoning.
And
That
do
was
we?
one of the concerns of the novel, though, because when the novel moved between the United States and South Africa, the novel shows that it's the same expectation in the United States that the oppressed are the ones who must forgive. The oppressed are the ones who must always be bending over backward to one even to assert their humanity. You will recall the incident where a white parent referred to Roland as an ape, and the principal of the school. First of all, the teacher covers up, even though she knew what happened. The teacher covered it up, and the principal goes and makes this invalid moral equivalency nonsense about something that Prudence had said about the other kid who was involved in that incident. Prudence had called him a runt, and Prudence quite rightly said, "So you're going to equate me calling that child a runt with that man calling my child a black child, with all the history that we've had, an ape?" Um, and the novel gives several instances of African Americans being asked to be the ones who must prove their humanity. There's so it does that all the time. There are several instances where it does that. So it is a concern that the novel has, that the oppressed are the ones who have to show that they're worthy of being treated like human beings in situations like this.
And then I wanted to focus a bit on Prudence. We actually started speaking about Prudence, and for me, Prudence was sort of peripheral in the apartheid story. She's just there observing the Truth and Reconciliation Committee. But what draws Prudence and Matshidiso to each other? And I don't think, I don't know if I mean, I don't know if they were drawn to each other because the relationship seemed very cold at first when they were in Johannesburg. And then then there's a 22-year gap in the novel. I don't know. I don't know if they were drawn to each other, but it just seemed convenient that they were associated with each other. I don't know what do you think?
I feel like they were drawn. I question, for example, why does she follow him outside? Why does she follow him? So I feel like on a certain level, there is a kind of unconscious recognition of mutual pain. And that is what draws her to him. Even though he was, I don't think I could say what I thought he was in terms of the way he reacted to her, the constant smirking, very irritating, the condescension even. But I felt like he also gathered her all the way up, divesting her of certain assumptions, challenging certain assumptions, and challenging how she navigated this space as a black woman in South Africa who was not African. Yes, so I there's this there's this belief that like attracts like, and I feel unconsciously she's is picking up on something in him that draws her to him, for better and for worse.
But I think Lauren Francis-Sharma also threw in a bit of male female chemistry in that relationship, um, because there was early when they were in Johannesburg where the incident when I would say she threw herself at him, basically. I don't know if she was doing that to deliberately play with our minds, the author I'm talking about. So apart from, common cause and the other stuff that you're talking about, Deborah, the basic animal instinct, which I always, Francine knows I always like to refer to this, was also at play. And the author did play with that. I don't think we could.
Yeah, I agree because I think from the beginning, her reaction to him, it was that sort of, I hate to say it, but that enemies to lovers type trope that we see in romance books where they hate each other, for absolutely no reason in the beginning and then slowly, whatever. I mean, this was not the case with this novel, but her initial reaction to him was so extreme that to me it could not help but signal that there was some attraction, some instinctive attraction between them. And then once they did actually start speaking, I think that's where they started seeing more of the commonalities and the things that they did have in common, the traumas that they both went through when they were teenagers. But yeah, I think like her reaction to him, to what, I mean, what he did was obviously ridiculous, but her reaction to it seemed kind of extreme to me. And it made me think, okay, there's an attraction there because like why are you reacting like this?
I don't
It's
know
more
that
like
I
enemies to acquaintances, enemies to mutual what is the term? Accomplices, enemies to accomplices.
I didn't think there was any kind of serious attraction. So I'm not saying that you're wrong. I'm just saying I didn't see it that way. I She was lonely. Um, she I think both Machadi, so I can't pronounce his name, and Prudence were broken. And I think that's what attracted them to each other. Well, initially the attraction was one way. it was Prudence to him. She was drawn to him initially because he wasn't interested at all. And I think she was lonely, and that is what sparked that kind of her making a sexual advance towards him. I don't think she found him, you know, all that attractive. Um, but I think what pulled them to each other was the brokenness. The two of them were broken and in very similar ways.
I agree there. I think the commonality in trauma that they both had, and of course, she already knew of her own experiences. So when she saw him reacting the way he did, she probably, as we say in the Caribbean, put one on one together and figured, oh, this must be somebody who was deeply impacted by apartheid. But then part of me also thinks that Prudence was just American. And she had that American curiosity about her because other people might have seen Machadiso storming out and said, okay, he's hurt. Let me give him some space. But then there's a sort of American stereotype where they become very curious and want an answer to why he's behaving the way he is. And throughout the novel, I think I saw that American curiosity coming out in Prudence. And it's so interesting how you have all these intersectionalities because she has the trauma. She's a Black American, but at the same time, she still has that sort of stereotypical curiosity that that we see play out often. Then, towards the end of the novel, Prudence reflects that Machidiso is a quote, a sad, beautiful, lonely human being. Do you agree with her?
Sad and lonely, yes, beautiful.
I
I
was
see
gonna say
nothing beautiful about Machadiso.
I was gonna say the exact same thing. Sad and lonely, but I did
But
not see any beauty in anything he said or did. He was broken, like you said, Paula. He was broken, and everything he did just showed the brokenness, showed his brokenness.
The thing is that Prudence was broken too, but Prudence wasn't odious. Machadiso is odious. Yeah, fight me, Deborah. I see you getting ready to fight me. Go ahead, fight
no,
me.
no, 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 no. I'm not. I don't know. I wouldn't say that she was odious, but she definitely had some sharp parts about her, right? And I think it came out in the way that she interacted with Davis and the way that she interacted with her son as well. I was even thinking that she is presenting as a reluctant mother. She has this is her reality and she has to, but it reminds me of what Matt asked her early in their encounter in the restaurant. You look like a hunter. So I feel like that is her nature. She's hard. She has sharp, parts about her. I won't say that she's odious, but she was definitely not a sweetbread as they say over here in Barbados.
Sharp, hard, and abrasive at times. But I
Yes.
would not put her in the same category as the other person who's I'm not going to attempt to even pronounce your name, Paula.
Just say
Because
Matt.
yeah, Matt, because at least you're making a very good stab at it. Um, no, this guy was self-serving. Right down to the end, and without, revealing or spoiling the thing. But so the beautiful part, I'll have to. That's a stretch. That would be a stretch for me.
Come, let
Broken,
me let
yeah,
me
yeah.
defend.
Mm.
Sorry, let me
Go ahead.
defend Prudence because Prudence was my girl. I'm sorry,
Mm,
and
mm.
I'm shocked. I'm shocked that y'all are saying Prudence was hard, etc. Prudence was a reluctant mother in the sense that she wasn't initially enthusiastic about becoming a mother. But once she became a mother, she was all in. She was simply, what we saw was an honest portrayal of the difficulty of being a mother. One, it's difficult to parent even when your child is not on this spectrum. It's always difficult to parent. Her kid was on the spectrum.
Yeah, and I
So
and
she
I
is
think
so she is all we saw was an honest portrayal
yeah,
of the difficulty anybody would have if they have to parent a child who is on the
and
spectrum
I
and
think
so
that was
severely on the spectrum.
a deliberate construct of the author to put the child on the spectrum, to bring out that aspect of what you're discussing there, Paula. The fact that we have to face the difficult nature that a parent has. And I have to be very careful with what I'm saying, because people on the spectrum are loved, and that we you know they embraced and all that. But we have to be truthful that what you saw in Prudence was what you would see perhaps in any other normal human being in that context. But
Um,
I still think she was sharp at the edges, Paula. I still think she had some abrasive parts about her. I looked at her relationship with her husband, and
And
uh,
all right, let me come and defend my girl again.
mm,
no, well, I would
Yo,
defend her
yo,
too because I like the character. But I'm just acknowledging that there are elements about her that makes her grimy to the point where she can stalk this global killer, this what's his name, Zwane. She is not an easy, she has to be hard in some parts. She has to
she's
be
broken.
tough.
She's
She
broken.
has to
Nobody.
be, she is, and it I don't want my observation to come across as some sort of negative critique of her, because I enjoyed this character. She felt real, but she was also a very hard person. She's not that likable. She doesn't need to be,
You
but
see,
she
I
isn't.
I found her likable. I loved her. I love Prudence. Maybe I'm mean. I don't know. And
I
I
she
loved
she
her.
felt real to me, and to the point where I had this very strong, okay, what I had a very strong reaction to her, right? I saw her as, and I think that's testimony, if that's the expression, to Francis-Sharma's construction of the
yeah,
narrative and
yeah, yeah,
the storytelling.
yeah,
That Prudence was real. Prudence is somebody I could work with. Prudence is somebody I don't have to like, but I completely understand.
yeah. Give her a
Prudence
backstory,
is yes, she's
Mm.
hard, but she's hard, and it comes out in different ways. I also feel like there's a way in which she's yearning to let her true self, to add to all of these different aspects of herself. Oh, she has to be very, and okay, to give an example from the same dinner party from hell, um where there's all of these exchanges happening between Matt and Tara and Davis and Prudence, but Davis does not see his wife the way that we are seeing, and the way that we get a sense at this point. We don't know the full story as yet, but we get a sense at this point that there is way more to this woman, that this stranger is revealing and is telling, and the way the exchanges were constructed, that we could see that there's more going on, but the husband Davis has no clue. So there is, I
I
feel like, in a way, that she is still sort of is the successfully having compartmentalized herself, is in many ways suppressing her true, this true aspect of herself, this other side of herself, this truth. Yes. um in a way that we could see that her husband has no idea about her. He knows that she had a hard upbringing. He's very cavalier and dismissive about it. And to the point where he embarrassed her, I was like, what is going on, young sir? But clearly there's more to Prudence than he himself is aware of. But immediately Matt Sidiso is bringing out of her in a lot through the nonverbal cues that Sharma, Francis-Sharma, laces throughout the dinner party exchange.
Yeah, but even in a literal sense, the relationship between Prudence and Matt and the husband's knowledge or lack thereof is a typical example of what you are talking about. I mean, I'm saying that in a literal sense, you know.
Okay.
So then
I
I
find
want
it
to oh,
interesting
go ahead,
that you
Paul.
all are so generous to Davis because it's in the
I'm
same
not.
way. In the same way. Oh, okay. So you're not being generous because
No,
I
because
thought
I
I
have.
from something Tony said
No, 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 I'm not being honest to him at all.
I thought there was generosity because I had very little patience with Davis. I thought Davis that incident at the restaurant. I interpreted it exactly the way Prudence did. He threw her under the bus, and for what?
Yes,
I couldn't understand what was in his
Well,
head.
I think he had an
Um,
inferiority complex. I think he, well, that's how I read him. He was trying to
he is
upgrade.
intimidated.
Yeah, 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 yeah. He wanted to have constantly seek hierarchical position above his wife, and that came through. He constantly was battling with that. So I found him to be a sad character, actually.
And you know when it really came out, his inferiority complex, when they were in the principal's office, he basically wanted to do the talking. He was tapping her leg. He was like, cool
I don't know
down.
about that. I
I
don't know about that. I don't know about that. That was because he described it. Because we're in Prudence's head when they're there, and Prudence is thinking he is indicating to her that we need to do the dance. And because he had been raised privileged, he's a privileged black man, he knew how to do the dance in these spaces of privilege to ensure that their son would benefit from the privilege that their son needed. Their son needed the privileges that the school offered. No, for me, the choice to keep that child in that school is highly questionable. And of course, Lauren Francis Sharma sets us up by starting the chapter with that quote from Malcolm X that it's really not a good idea. I'm paraphrasing, to have your enemies educate your
Educate
child.
your child. Yeah.
Um, but I didn't dislike Davis, but I agree with you. I agree with everyone else who thinks he had an inferiority complex because the novel tells us that from the very beginning that she's the bright one. She
Yep.
is the one who set him up in his career. Um, and we see from the beginning, and Deborah was speaking about Prudence being a reluctant parent, that Prudence is the one who has to sacrifice her career. She's a brilliant one, but because they have a kid who is on the spectrum who needs her to be a full-time mom, she is the one who has all this um, talent, and she's the one who has to give up this her career and this space in which she functions so well to dedicate herself full time to this job, this other job that really was his idea. She didn't want children.
to sort of continue along those lines in terms of how her relationship with Roland, her son, advanced the story. I thought that the inclusion of this particular storyline helped to make Prudence a lot more palatable for me. It showed her patience. It showed that there was some, even though there was some reluctance, it showed that she wasn't through and through a terrible human being that you could write off, but that she was just a victim of circumstance, and she was called out of necessity. That's how I saw it. I saw her relationship with Roland to be complex, yes, because of his diagnosis, but it brought out somewhat of a caring mother. Not the best mother, but you saw glimpses of a caring mother somewhere there. That's what I thought.
It brought out
Man,
the mama there.
I don't know about glimpses of a caring mother. I thought she was a dedicated mother. We just saw that mothering is not a bed of roses, because it isn't.
Well,
It
and not to
isn't.
belabor the point, but I think in fairness again to Prudence, she did do her own reflections on the type of parent she thought she was. So she was herself trying to fill her gaps, be better, sit down. And not many people do that. Not many people. Some people are oblivious to how they go about things, but
But
those
that's
who,
what makes her a good mother. The
yeah,
fact
yeah,
that
yeah,
she
I'm
can
I'm saying that.
recognize her feelings.
Absolutely, Paula. That's what I'm saying. I'm saying that, she did have several of those moments throughout the novel where she introspected,
Yeah, and I think the sorry there, Tony. I think the introspection is what distinguishes her from or at least I feel like would make her a bit more successful in the end, if we could say that, in a way that Matt Sediso. You know why I'm confusing it? Because the audiobook, there's a different pronunciation than how I was accustomed to saying it based on how I'm reading it in the text. But Matt. So there are several instances where Prudence is very reflective. She contemplates, what her father would do if he were in her place, or if she could consult him. What would her father do if he had the opportunity to take out somebody like Zwane? And considering how she lost her father as well, that was to me, a very powerful moment where she stopped and that she paused and reflected. And I mean, she still ended up doing what she was going to do, what she did anyway. But there are these moments where she reflects, where she tries to come to terms with her past and how it is affecting her in during the events of the book, in a way that I'm not sure that Matt is as successful. Whereas I feel like Prudence has a bit more agency, or is enabled to have more agency in a way that Matt is not quite successful.
I agree.
Yeah, I
So
agree with you because I feel like for Matt, he I don't think he has ever actually reflected the way that Prudence did on anything. And he's using what happened as for him, these terrible things happened to him, and therefore he's justified in doing whatever he has continued to do. He has never stopped to think, is this really how I should be reacting? He just see like, okay, this was horrible, and therefore I can do these awful things because I was treated badly.
Yeah, and
And
he's
another
also
thing,
driven by shame too. He's driven by a great deal of shame as well, feeling complicit with what happened to his brother, and then the family, as a all the cascade of effects on his family after.
and this is another thing that drives my belief that this is a morality novel. Because we see when Prudence acts immorally, whereas I think his Matt's behavior is amoral. So I for, this is one of the many reasons I think this is a morality novel.
What do you
Do you
say
think?
immoral without
Yes.
spoiling it? The part I would agree with you on, Paula, with the amorality is what he did coming towards the end of the novel. I think he had set her up, and uh,
Beginning, middle, and end.
yeah,
Matt
but
was amoral. Beginning, middle,
yeah,
and
certainly
end.
certainly at the end was a big shining light on the kind of character he was, you know. So amoral in that sense, yeah.
Ruthless for sure.
Mm.
Exploiting their past, and I don't know if it's well. I hadn't really thought about the text in that frame as to whether it was a morality novel or not a morality novel. I was thinking of it in terms of how history, like there are several layers of understanding of history, the personal, the political, the national, the global, and how all of these things intersect. And I was thinking of it in terms of how characters, if they're not, if how people to sort of step away from the confines of the text and look at the larger discussion of history, for instance, how if you are careful and you read enough history, to quote a character from one of my favorite series, it becomes prophecy almost, right? So there are all of these elements in their past that is driving them in different ways. And I don't I understand Matt's predicament. I Because we're told the story largely from Prudence's perspective, we will see him as this threat to her family, right? He is this threat to her family. So we would be very sort of averse to his actions and looking at his actions as anything more than threatening this woman. She's living her life. 22 years later, why are you just showing up, right? And he's very ruthless. But I don't know, I saw it as characters deal having to deal with their past and taking different approaches, to dealing with these events of their past.
As you guys are discussing this and you talk about his rootlessness, I am not sure I'm going to forgive him just on the basis of his passing because more things are coming to memory. Look at how he tried to set up Prudence. I don't want to spoil the thing again with that, the policeman um, um, episode, right? You know, that is, that's not nice.
Lauren complicates that story though, you know.
Yeah.
She puts in a suggestion in the novel that perhaps Prudence engineered that.
Yeah.
That Prudence, yes, there's a suggestion in the novel
Hmm.
that Prudence engineered the way Matt um,
Took care of
behaved
that. Hmm.
towards the policeman.
Yeah.
Um, and clearly, I mean, if she's the author, clearly she knows better what these characters are thinking and doing than we do. So I thought it was very interesting that she put that there.
Hmm.
She doesn't want us to think of Matt as a pure villain, and she does a very good job of making us see his background so that we know what motivates him. But it still didn't endear me to him. None of it.
No, but in the way he came back and tried
It's
to, I
straight.
would say, blackmail into,
Yes,
from that incident, used it as a form of blackmail into pursuing um, this other guy. So that's what I meant by doubling down on that rootlessness that Deborah's talking about.
After
he's the way he's operating is, it recalls those, and I guess it speaks to genre as well. The spy handlers, the agents who handle the spies out in the field, who have all of these, and it kind of reveals what I've been consuming a lot lately as well. Yes, these characters who have who are their main goal. There's a main goal, and they're not concerned who they sacrifice, who they inconvenience, who they hurt in the process, because this is the job. For Matt, the job was Zwane, because Zwane's existence is a stain on his existence because of how of the shame that he felt. Was it shoes that he promised him? It was
he,
shoes.
yeah, he
He
gave him
gave
a pair
him
of
he
old
gave him
shoes.
a pair of
Shoes.
Nikes, some old Nikes.
To and as a result, he lost his family. So I Matt is big picture, and a little inconvenience, Prudence being, you know
Collateral.
having
But there's a
being
lot of that
collateral,
in
being a
yeah,
casualty.
Yeah, being a
Is
casual.
this
But there's a lot of that in the novel because if you remember from the very beginning, there's a scene in the police station where the policemen are speaking with the first policeman we saw. The other his colleagues are speaking with him, and they say to him, well, part of the conversation they're having is what the white people who are being examined by the Truth and Reconciliation Committee should do to take heat off of themselves is to sacrifice Swane. And they do precisely that. So the novel plays with that idea quite a bit, people being used as collateral, being collateral damage to the bigger picture, being sacrificed. Sacrifice is an interesting. I wonder whether Lauren was consciously playing with the idea of sacrifice because there is that element of the idea of sacrifice. And then you'll remember during, as Deborah describes it, the dinner party from hell. Um, One of the thoughts that goes through Prudence's head is when Davis says this horrible thing, is that she felt like he was offering her up as a sacrificial animal. So I wonder whether that it's coincidental or whether Lauren wanted to examine the whole concept of sacrifice in this novel.
In our
It
last two
can't be,
minutes or
can't be
so,
coincidental. Can't be because there's too many instances of sacrifice.
in
You sacrifice justice for truth. It can't be. It can't be. But we can ask her.
in our last 2 minutes or so, I actually wanted to pick up a previous point because I think Prudence was also calculated. Matt was very calculated, probably more so than Prudence. But remember, Prudence sought the truth about her father's death, but she didn't go the lengths that Matt went. And in the end, we find out that Matt was trying to resolve a situation with Anini or Anani. I'm not sure how the name is pronounced. So I still feel very sympathetic of the position that Matt found himself in, and given the sort of global circumstances of apartheid and what his family faced, I think I could forgive him. I think this is
I
my truth and reconciliation moment.
you're reconciled to the idea of forgiving Matt? Yes. I also believe that he has a fundamental understanding, and again, this is not praise, this is just an observation. He has a fundamental understanding that people will not do the quote unquote right thing unless they have some kind of stake, something to lose in in whatever venture it is. So he knew what would motivate Prudence, and yes, it I'm not admiring him, I promise. I am just in awe of how ruthless this man was and calculating, as
And
Tony was saying,
manipulative.
manipulative, because he knows that if what does Prudence have to lose? Okay, well, this is what she will lose. This is what I will I will threaten so that she can help me achieve this. And then it's not, and the manipulation also comes into when he brings in the it was a Zimbabwean woman or Botswanan woman, right?
I think
Who
she's
had a
Zimbabwean. Hmm.
Zimbabwean, and the
Hmm.
history, the connection between Zimbabwe and South Africa and Mozambique and the, oh my gosh, another history lesson, right? Um, that he brought her in was a way to I'm like, if Prudence does not, if she's not persuaded then, well, by him, well, maybe she would be persuaded by this woman who is from another country altogether, and this monster went and disrupted her life, caused her so much grief, right? So I feel like in Matt's case, another feature of his character is that he recognized that people, if they're not motivated to do the right thing for the sake of doing the right thing, they have to have skin in the game. And this is how he played his cards.
Yes. Oh,
Yeah,
Tony, you
no,
want
no,
to make a
I was
quick
just going to
point?
make one quick point and say, to Paula's Prudence being a girl, I like the way the novel um, exited, the narrative with Prudence being the heroine. and I felt that was justified. You know, she even with Matt's calculations and his manipulation and so on, the matter was handled by Prudence. You know, and in her own way.
But
And
Matt knew she would.
well, I guess he knew.
That's how calculating he was. He
I
knew she
guess, I
would
guess, I guess. But I like the flavor
because
of
he saw her as a hunter.
yeah, I like the flavor of how the Lauren Francis Sharma ended the novel. You know, it's like a good movie. You walk out feeling
Mhm.
you know. So that was good.
It is through weakness and vulnerability that most of us discover our souls. Desmond Tutu. That is all we have for you for now. Thank you for joining us. The next time you see us, we'll be interviewing Lauren Francis Sharma on this novel, Casualties of Truth. Thank you for joining us.